All right, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you everyone. I'm just ecstatic to see such a joyous occasion, and everybody so happy to be here. So my name is Stephen Shane. I'm the site coordinator for the Emerson Prison Initiative. I've had the distinct privilege of teaching each of our cohorts in their writing classes, especially in the beginning of their college, I guess their college journeys, including Mr. Mac Hudson, who's here today, and sharing with us his film, Massissippi. So thank you, Mac. It's my privilege to introduce the film, introduce you and the panelists to follow the film. So Massissippi records the oral histories of three formerly incarcerated Black Bostonians, Stacey Borden, Omar Abdur-Rahim, and Gregory Davis, and their experiences of harm and of personal resilience within the Massachusetts Department of Corrections. The film also documents their dedication to supporting and improving their communities post-release. And in talking with Mac a little bit before we screened this, Mac wanted to make sure that we also understood, these narratives center around a broader story of the first Black commissioner of the Department of Corrections, named John Boone, who ushered in the reforms in 1972 around community corrections, and he faced and combated institutional racism within the system, and this is part of that story as well. So thank you, Mac, for sharing this film with us, and I think we're ready. So if you want to dim the lights, and we can go ahead. Massissippi. To introduce our panelists today, Mac Hudson is a community organizer, activist, and agent for change. He is a Racial Equity and Corrections Initiative paralegal community liaison at Prisoners Legal Services of Massachusetts, fighting the systemic racism harming Black and brown people in Massachusetts, in the Massachusetts criminal legal system. Mac served 33 years in the Massachusetts Department of Corrections, most of which for a crime he did not commit. While incarcerated as a pro se litigator, Mac successfully sued the Department of Correction many times, winning halal meals, Jamua services, and access to books in solitary confinement. He also earned his BA in Media, Literature, and Culture with the Emerson Prison Initiative. Mac is the founder and executive director of Access MA, and it's From Liabilities to Contributors Initiative. Massissippi is his second documentary. Omar Abdur-Rahim is a man of great Muslim faith, first and foremost. He was born in Boston and grew up in the Mission Hill housing projects in the late 60s and early 70s, where his long history of adversity with the criminal legal system began. Omar ultimately served 48 years in prison from 1972 to 2020 as the result of struggling with drug addiction early on in his life. Omar today works for teen empowerment and serves as a mentor of the Visions program. He's very dedicated to changing young people's lives and utilizes his wisdom and lived experience to fiercely advocate for them. Stacey Borden is the founder and executive director of New Beginnings Reentry Services since 1982. For almost 30 years, Borden has been in and out of prison. From her personal experiences and understanding of the system, Stacey became an abolitionist and advocate for women suffering from domestic and sexual abuse. Stacey created her organization in response to the lack of resources for these women suffering from past traumas and injustices within prison. With a master's degree in mental health counseling, with a concentration in addictions and trauma, Borden is a strong advocate for drama therapy. Borden is also an author, performance artist, motivational speaker, and an activist. Gregory Davis. Gregory Davis is the founder and executive director of Metro Boston Alive, Incorporated. He has served as the clinical director at Boston's DeMock Center and filled multiple leadership roles at the Boston Housing Authority. He has also fostered long-term relationships with the Roxbury Boys and Girls Club and several youth centers. He has served as a substantial pillar in the Boston community and has worked tirelessly to support and educate youth, adults, and families in underserved and at-risk communities to make healthy decisions around drug use. And last but certainly not least, Dwight M. Cruthird is our moderator this afternoon. Is a 56-year-old Boston-born resident. He's a father. Yes, you are, and as well a husband, as well as a grandfather. Dwayne has also went to Boston Public Schools. He's gone to the military and served time in prison. Since being released, Dwayne has been advocating for prison reform and people's rights while working on remodeling homes. All right, so I leave it to you, Dwayne. Thank you very much, and thank you to our panel.
Thank you. I think half of that is a lie. But in any event, thank you all for all attending. It takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of patience to be here and do what y'all are doing, as well as the panelists. So to get right to it, Mr. Mac, why did you create this documentary and name it Massissippi?
So I created Massissippi and named it as such because I wanted to first take control of our narrative about what was happening, the Black and brown experience behind the wall that no one really knows. And it is enriched with such a historical context that's relative to the mindset when you think in terms of just what John Boone, the first Black commissioner, encountered as the first Black commissioner coming from the South and being Black and up here in the North. What he experienced for institutional racism was identical to what Mississippi practiced outwardly. And so we have a way of thinking about, Massachusetts as being very liberal in its presentation to the rest of the world. But in fact, the reality of it is that there is a lot of, and very much still today, institutional racism practice as a matter of formality, right? Like it's the status quo of every day. And so I wanted to make those connections that this is very real, and it's still happening to Black and brown folks. We kind of inherited that struggle that John Boone has, encountered, and we're still now facing today.
Thank you. Ms. Stacey, I have a question for you as well. Is it true that the development of the New Beginnings reentry was an implementation of a formula that worked for you in your own reentry success in sobriety?
I hear that question, and I'm not sure if it was a formula that worked for me, other than my journey when I came out, that there was no formula. Like there just was no resources. As to why I kept going in and out, in and out. And so on the journey of being out and being determined to not recidivate, I had an opportunity to travel through my college career and going over to Scandinavia and seeing comparison to social policy, really seeing how the comparison of their prison system to our prison system. Something was working over there. They had less recidivism. Their recidivism rate at that time in 2014 was 2% to our 97% in the United States. And I knew that I had to create something different. And it also belonged to a world of arts and theater that really helped me. When you could see someone portray your story on stage, something was like enlightening. I was like, wow, this is so healing. I'm down for this. So in that sense is why I knew that we needed to create something different in a reentry perspective for women in particular that suffer from sexual and domestic violence.
And so to add to that, what have been your challenges with getting women, other women, similarly situated, seeking similar services? What type of challenges have you incurred?
I gotta breathe on that one. The challenges is we've grown almost 800% embedded in the prison system because nobody ever talks about us. No disrespect to men. Of course, I'm sitting here with my fellow survivors of incarceration, but we often talk about men. That's been the topic for decades, of men being incarcerated and the rate of that. And so we don't get talked about. And so I think a lot of the barriers is really how we get women out of prisons.
Thank you.
They're suffering. We're buried in prisons.
Thank you.
All the way from just property damage to, I don't know, transgressions of murder because we know what happened. If anybody knows what happened in the Framingham 8, people are trying to survive trauma and trying to survive abuse. And so I think the barriers in that is we can't get women out as fast as we should be. And we are sentenced astronomically more than men, almost, to this day. And lastly, really funding. What do you mean you're a formerly incarcerated black woman trying to come out and do something different and help other women come out of prison? We don't want to fund you because you're taking away the capitalist part of job security or slave labor or all the capital people, like specific judges that come from corporate law that are invested in the privatization of prison systems. So, I mean, there's a lot that we could talk about, the barriers.
So to go off script to address a question dealing with the prison system, with women in prison, what are some of the things you endured while in prison between sexual abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, cell deprivation? What did you endure?
You said, what did I hear or what did I see? Or what did I experience? Like all of it.
What did you experience? What did you hear? What did you see?
You know, I think first thing first is, you know, you heard my story coming from sexual trauma, and I just want people to imagine if you had never went into a prison and something happens and you end up in there and you can't contain your emotions. You know, it's all male dominating. It's not like we have a whole bunch of women guards running around a prison. In a woman's prison, it's predominantly men. And so you come from a sexual assault, you might have just had a drink, you might have just gotten a car accident for drink driving, and you can't deal with your emotions, and now you're in a prison environment and you can't figure that out, and now they strap you to a chair, like you're getting ready to be electrocuted or something, like you're literally strapped, and then you're muzzled because you're screaming and crying. The other part of it is, some of us are vulnerable coming from, you know, trying to survive in prostitution or sex workers. And you don't really know how to navigate that in a prison environment when you have some of the particular guards that are willing to go and buy you lipstick and perfume, stuff that you can't have in a prison. And so now you're in there 3 months and you're pregnant. And the prison calls it Prison Rape Elimination Act. But who gets the sentence? Who gets to go to the hole? It's called inner perimeter police. You have police inside of a prison that are taking you to put you in a confined environment called CCU, closed custody unit, because you shouldn't have had this sexual act. So not only do we get beat up and stomped, or around the country, we know federally women are being sexually driven to feed their bodies to correctional officers or to administrators. And we know this because we know that there's a motion or a movement called the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, who just sued Dublin Prison out of California because they broke a woman's back because she refused to come out of her cell. And then it just unfolded. But what did the Department of Justice do? They moved everybody out of the prisons and they moved the COs too. So nobody ever gets accountable or charged other than us.
Thank you. Greg, I have a question. So with respect to the documentary, there was evidence that you clearly were a problem. You clearly did things that had people a little bit upset, but yet the documentary shows the accolades, the awards. So one of my questions it's basically a twofold question. Who was the problem, you or the Department of Correction?
Well, first, I get emotional when I looked at the film because even though I've been home over 40-something years, I can still remember those days, those years of being incarcerated. Who was right and who was wrong? The system was wrong. society was wrong for believing what they told you, what they were doing, and what we were doing when we wasn't doing those things. I was never a disciplinary problem in prison. I was a management problem. And I paid a hell of a price for being that type of a problem. And I always look at my little brother, Matt, because he was going through the same thing in Concord that I was going through in Walpole and Norfolk. Because I used to watch how the system just constantly just drives you to break you down mentally and emotionally. And I used to always tell folks when I go around the country speaking that if you ever wanted to know the true essence of emotions, have a hidden camera or something inside the cells when they lock the doors at night. When all of a sudden you take the mask off of survival and become human again, missing your loved ones, wondering, how did I get here? So many folks that I ran into in the prison was brothers who couldn't read, couldn't write, because they took a drink or something and they ended up with a life sentence. And every time we would go before a classification board, it was like we knew Corey before you all even heard about it. Oh, you're doing a great job, but because of your past history, see you in 6 months. See you in 6 months. But then someone who didn't look like us, out the door. And so, you know, I give all kinds of praises to my brother Omar before I got shipped out of Norfolk. He really kind of balanced me because it was, you have to have someone that you can trust. And I always say this, Omar must knew that there was a method in walking the yard, because you can then talk about how you really feel with someone to trust. And Omar balanced me with that. But I had said to him, Omar, this got to stop, and I'm shutting it down. Shutting Norfolk down. We are not going to the classification board no more. And I know I was going to pay a price. I knew I was going to pay a price, but the price was more important to me that my brothers had an opportunity to be able to move like everybody else. And I'll never forget that day. You know, he held his prayers out on the lawn, on the football field. And for the first time in my life, I saw a rainbow over there while they was working out in the yard, but respecting that we were not going to do anything. We were on strike. And I remember when they came, took me and 20 more other brothers out of Norfolk. And the price I paid constantly from that, 10 block, 9 block, Bridgewater, trying to break me, watching people come back from those Bridgewater, talking like me, but coming back looking like a zombie, not knowing if my door was going to open and someone was going to run in there and kill me. But I had to do what I had to do because I wanted to be able to one day be out here so that I, Omar, Stacey, Mac, we are, and those others that are out here that's been in the penitentiary, we are the beaming light. We are the hope for those brothers who are still out there wondering if there ever could be an opportunity for them. We are the opportunity, which is why I do this work.
With that said, Greg, my follow-up question would have been, why do you think you were considered a problem, but haven't gotten definition to it? Why were you considered a management problem, but yet today presumed to be very successful in the work that you do?
It's my cousin, bless his soul, he's gone right now, Dr. Michael E. Haynes. He told me one time, he says, Greg, you got to make a decision. You can't reach for the stars with one hand and play in the mud with the other. You got to make a choice. And I made that choice. I made that choice to reach with both hands going up. It wasn't easy. And I'll never forget how, when I met John Boone, how we became, can you imagine now? Me and the Commissioner of Corrections became friends. Because when we're alone, he became the human, the brother, going through the same kind of racism that I was going through. And we were able to talk about that kind of stuff. And he knew that he wasn't going to last long. I knew he wasn't going to last long. Not in a system that tells people corrections. I was like, why did they ever name this corrections? It's the penitentiary. Penitentiary is punishment. And he did not last long. But long enough for us to pull it off. And I got to tell you that we were the first group. My basketball team, we came out first. And we would come out and we'd go back. Come out and go back. And then they started spreading it out to the long-term folks at that time. And I remember, just like Omar, you remember, how they did with Willie Horton. And the thing is, Willie never got the help he should have had while he was there. So many Willie Horton mentalities was walking around in these penitentiaries. Many abused men walking around in the penitentiaries. Many of us who came from what goes on in this house stays in this house. Yep. Many who were raised by one woman, because our fathers was either in the penitentiary or gone. And so that's why I was able to go through what I had to go through. Because there's no change without struggle. You got to struggle for change. And so when I came out, I promised myself I would not go back and give my life in the hands of folks who don't know me, who don't have any love or concern for my life. That I will be here for folks when they come out to let them know, you don't have to go back there. You don't have to let them keep making money off of you. It's time for you to make money off of them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Omar, thank you for attending as well. The documentary tracks your evolution of becoming a well-respected individual in the system, both by your peers as well as correctional officers, to the extent that your commentation made it to the highest level of the governor's desk. And we've seen others who've had similar success. And so when you were denied at the highest level, what did it do to you psychologically, and what was the message you received?
Well, as Greg had alluded to, John Boone came in and he was a reformist. So when I got to Walpole and got to talking to different guys in the joint, one of them said, "Reese, why don't you put in for a furlough?" I said, "Get the hell out of here, man. What are you talking about, a furlough? I got a first-degree life sentence." He said, "No, I'm telling you, you can get a furlough." So I always had to get confirmation from other sources than when a joker in the yard would tell me something. So I went, I checked, they said, "You're eligible." They had a moratorium. So I asked the case manager, "So what do you have to do to get a furlough?" I knew furloughs. I was in reform school and going back, was able to go in and out. But anyways, I translated being able to get a furlough, meaning I could leave the prison. I could leave the prison. You would sign off for me to leave the prison with a first-degree life sentence. I thought it was kind of insane, but I was up for it. You know, I was going to get me one of them furloughs, right? Because he said, when he said to me what it takes, I translated it to be good. Oh, I said, I know how to be good. And so my journey was a journey of looking at the possibilities and looking at having the opportunity, if it arose, that I didn't have to come back to prison. I mean, they let me walk out of the prison. So dealing with your question, so my journey was more of looking at my personal transformation, because as I shared in the film, I was from Mission Hill. I was the oldest of 8 in my family, raised by a single female had a household. And when the drugs, the heroin especially, moved through our community, most of us that were young, males and females, we became addicted. And it was I don't even know the word to use, because it just devastated our community. And we were dying, we were going to prison. And when I got to prison and met guys in prison that I had grew up with in the projects and knew from different areas of the community, I looked around, man, and it was, I don't even have words to express how insane it was up in the penitentiary. How insane it was to have us moving around. As Greg alluded to, the COs had allowed certain individuals to move around the institutions, create chaos. They throw them back up in 9 Block and hold them down for a while, but then riots would happen, other things would happen. As Greg alluded to, guys were going to Bridgewater, coming back with having met one of those sisters down in Bridgewater, Stella or Thorazine, and they would come back, foam in the corner of their mouth and shuffling, talking slow. That scared me to death. The only thing I was afraid of, the thing I feared most, don't lose your mind. I wasn't worried about anything else. Don't lose your mind. So when you ask me about the pains and what I went through when I went through the system, I got furloughs, I was going in and out of the system. I was able to go to minimum security when I had 6 years in. When I had 6 years in on a first-degree life sentence, I was in an institution with no walls. I went to Boston pre-release. I did 8.5 years of my time on Morton and Harvard Street. So I was moving through the system, because commutations was a part of the rehabilitation program. So guys that were serving life sentences, they could actually get their sentences reduced through commutations as a part of the rehabilitation program. So we could attend the college programs. We attended most of the programs that were there. Guys were excelling. I heard the young man, I think it's Mr. Rosario. Mr. Rosario talked about the camaraderie. All of that was there, and guys were moving to do the right thing. And when I put in for commutation in 1985, I saw the board in 1986, 87. They gave me a 7-0 vote. The caucus ran for president. I had to wait 6 years before a new governor came in. That was Governor Weld. Stacey had alluded to the Framingham 8. That year, of 1993, the governor signed commutations for women, the 8 women, and 3 males. I was one of them. And unbeknownst to me, it just so happened that the 2 males, they received commutations. When I came up, the issue was some of the people on the governor's council knew the family members. They were contributors to the Democratic Party. And also it happened to be that the individuals that owned the store were Greek, and Dukakis was Greek, and he knew them. So he came out and made the public statement. He never intended for me, Omar Abdur-Rahim, to ever get out of prison, and who is Governor Well to sign commutations when he's supposed to be the break rock governor. So they gunned me. 1993, the governor's council, they denied my commutation. Members of the parole board were there. They sent word, have Omar put his papers back in. I put them back in 1994, and I got another 7-0 vote. But then it stayed on the desk for 10 years. So that was 16 years with a 7-0 vote from the parole board. Had I had any other decision, if I had any other sentence, I would have been out in 1987. So here's what happens after that. 2004, Mitt Romney comes in as the governor, and he throws the commutations in the trash. Now the system has changed. So what happens? 2004, I put it back in for another commutation. The politics has changed, the board has changed, and the board told me, your petition has been denied because you have not given us or sent us anything that meets the threshold of a hearing before the board. And that's after having 2 7-0 votes from that same board. So literally all that I had worked for, all that I had done, my whole record of 115 furloughs over 8 years going in and out, being in minimum security for 15 years, being the last first-degree lifer outside the walls in the Massachusetts prison system, that all went away. And someone asked me, how did I handle that? I handled it as dignified as I could. And that means I'm a Muslim. My reality is, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. From God you come, from him to him is your return. In between is your life. In between is your destiny. So whatever comes your way, that belongs to you, and you're supposed to use this aql, this intellect, to deal with it in the best way that you can. My greatest pain was they allowed me to get married. I've been married for 40 years. My wife is still with me. I have a son. I'll be 41 years. I have a son who's 40 years old. And my greatest pain was I felt like I let them down, even though it wasn't me, it was the system, because I had all kinds of support from all walks of the community, and I felt the pain of them. One of my supporters, he said, Omar, I love you, brother, but I'm gonna tell you something. I'll never attend one of them things again. He said, I thought I was down south you talking about Massissippi. He said, I thought I was in Mississippi the way them people did you at the board. You know what they asked me at the commutation board? What are the 5 principles of Islam? What do you think about the Ayatollah Khomeini putting a hit out on Salman Rushdie? Why do you think God made you? So those are my questions. So I handled the questions, but the reality is it already looked like a done deal. So my struggle, if I can say it like that, was to keep my head up and keep doing what I had to do. Because the reality for me was transformation from a kid in the street, drug addicted, to becoming a Muslim, wherein I now found my humanity. I was able to see the dignity for my life. That pretty much covered whatever I was going to go through. So I felt pain for the people that had supported me so much. I also felt a betrayal in the system. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. The majority of us who come to prison, especially young people, our issues in our environment that we came from was an issue of trust, meaning we had been lied to, we had been abused in so many ways that we didn't trust anybody. We didn't even, when we was hustling with each other, we hardly kept one eye cocked on each other when we was hustling. Because you know if someone touches the money first, you might not get a chance to get your share, full share. My point there is trust. So when I decided, because I didn't believe that they was gonna let me go in and out of the prison. I didn't believe I was gonna go to a minimum security. I didn't believe. But then when it happened, and they happened to honor their side, and I thought about my moms. I told you I'm the oldest of 8 in my family. So I thought about my moms and my brothers and sisters, and they deserve more from me than what they got from me. And so that transformation, that was part of what motivated me for transformation, to give my mom the son that she should have had in the first place. So for me, the issue was, okay, I'm gonna try it. They honored their part. I honored my part. I was actually moving through the system. And then when they denied me, it went almost back to square one. Don't trust these jokers. I'm using jokers as, you know, don't trust these jokers, but that really kind of, that was probably, if I can say, the most painful part, is that when you trust somebody and they break the trust, when you're betrayed, that's very painful, because you feel like a fool. To go in and out of those prisons, bringing yourself back, to some degree you feel like a fool. So if you ask me what I went through, what my issue was relative to being shot down twice, and then being told that there was nothing in my record that even warranted being seen again, and then that I had to contract 4th stage prostate cancer, metastasized, to be able to get out of prison. I don't have words for that. They put in a medical, the legislator, they had passed a medical parole law, and it was about a year before I put in for it. I was working with my lawyers, and we was working on the adolescent condition motion for the court, that they raised the level of the adolescent age for guys to be able to get the benefit of it. So when they, my lawyers came to me and they said, Omar, the case is good, it looks like it's going through, but the reality is we're concerned about your cancer. I'm altruistic. No, let's do this because this will help so many people. They said, well, look at the policy. I looked at the policy. The policy stated that a person had to be severely disabled or have a terminal illness to the degree that the likelihood is they would die in 18 months. And I fit that category. The policy also stated that the Commissioner of Corrections had to answer the petition within 60 days. So I put in for the release, and 60 days after I put in, I walked out of prison. Unbelievable. So it said that your disability should, you should terminate within 18 months, and I have to say, alhamdulillah, praise due to Allah, I've been out for 5 years now.
And what, thank you for sharing that. And with that being said, I just had one follow-up question. You said earlier about you just didn't want to lose your mind. Do you believe that your Islamic faith and belief had something to do with you not losing your mind during that time?
Oh, absolutely, because the reality is most of us fell into the trap of drug addiction and criminal life. It was a trap. So I had cold turkey at least 3 times when I was in the street as a kid. I started using the drugs around 13, 14 in terms of mainlining. I'm out there doing the crime, but I'm wearing myself out. I would cold turkey. That means I'd stop using the drugs. I could see something, it wasn't good for me. But each time that I cold turkey, there was nowhere to go. I go back down the project. I'm in the elevator. They getting high, and they say, "Reese, you want some?" I don't know what I'm doing in the elevator in the first place. I'm supposed to be clean. They said, "You want some?" I said, "Nah, man, go ahead, go ahead." The sulfur hits my nose. I see the cooker's getting low. You know, fix me up. And I'm back in. So that experience of being on them drugs, it wears you out. It numbs you up. And so sometimes I only have words to express my life, because I tell people all the time I'm living in the miracle of my life. I love every single day that I live. Inside, I loved every single day that I lived. Not lived in prison, but lived. Because when you ask me about Islam, when I was, as I said, when I was in Walpole, I looked around for what I could connect with that would bring me to another state, somewhere that I know I needed to be. And it was Islam, the Nation of Islam at that time, in 1973. I joined the nation in July the 4th, 1973, as a matter of fact. Because I said, okay, we're gonna play with Independence Day. That's my Independence Day, July the 4th, 1973. That's the last time I got high. That's the last time I did anything to abuse myself. And from that time to now, how can I not be living in a miracle? How can I not be living in a miracle? So yes, Islam, because Islam, the principles of Islam took me back to my grandmother. Took me back to people that had my best interests at heart and would tell me things that I knew were right, but I didn't have the capacity at that time to connect with it. So my 5 prayers a day was, to me, I had to use more discipline to do that than any rule that they had in the penitentiary. I used to reduce what they were doing in the penitentiary to bring myself to a place where I'm walking with some dignity in a space that there's not supposed to be any dignity. And Islam did that for me. It wasn't prison, it was Islam. So thank you for the question, my brother.
Thank you, Omar. So I guess this next question is for the panel at large. It circles around and relates to John Boone as being the first black commissioner of the Department of Corrections. And there's been several forums in which he spoke. He's spoken at the Boston University on topics such as crisis, reform, applying lessons from correctional history, things as far as John Boone's era, and at Harvard University when prisoners ran Walpole 50 years later. But with the ideology and the thought processes that John Boone wanted to institute, are any of those thought processes currently being used in the system?
Well, let me just interject 1 second. Because of the sake of time, it's like 5:11. I want to make sure that we have enough time for the audience to actually ask questions. So what I wanted to do at this point, I know Dwayne does such a great job moderating, and the panel has been great, just getting out some of the things that I really wanted this audience to really hear in connection to the film, and the reason why the film had to be made, to kind of understand why these historical moments have not been recorded. I think, I don't want to mispronounce her name, Rachel, what's it? Rachel made a point of talking about Arnie King going up, and at our last event, we mentioned Arnie King was one of those folks who went to commutation and was denied, but this is largely not known to the world, right? And so when we think in terms of what institutional racism look like, you know, it is, for us, it's detrimental, and it links us back to why there has been a revolving door in and around the Black community, right? And I think accountability starts with first acknowledging this history, and then acknowledging the fact that it's continuing, right, even to this very moment. And then also looking at some solutions in and around what we could be doing to address these types of harms that's being committed. And so one of the things I wanted to say before I open up the floor is that we have a legislative initiative by the Racial Equity and Correction Initiative at PLS, which we're asking, well, we're trying to support a bill to be passed that will collect racial data in the Department of Correction so that we can see who's being allowed to have access to these educational type programs, mediums, lower security minimums, pre-releases, all the things that's supposed to acclimate you into society, right? And then the other part is of that bill is oversight. We want meaningful oversight so that folks can actually, I mean, there will be an entity that would enforce what the legislative intent was when these bills were passed. There's been many bills that's been passed. None of them has been enforceable because it's left to the large discretion of the Department of Correction of how it understands the legislative intent. So they create policies to undermine that very legislative intent. And so this has been kind of a game, a circular game that has huge consequences particularly for everyone involved, but largely for Black and brown folks who are already, you know, don't get the bottom of the very least, right? So I just wanted to kind of give you some context and get you to understand that there is a resolve out there that we're asking for you to support, but also so that you really understand what's really happening in Massachusetts, which is related to the name of why most of us call it Massissippi, behind the wall. With that, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions.
Excuse me, before you do that, you said there's an initiative, legislative bill. What is that bill?
Yeah, I just said it. It's collection of racial data.
Collection of racial data.
Yeah,
Okay.
collection of racial data and meaningful oversight in the Department of Correction.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, I don't have the number right off the top of my head, so let me get back to you on that. But the bill has been filed by Liz Miranda and Russell Holmes.
Questions, audience?
Should I take one of these mics?
Yeah, sure, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
If anyone has any questions for the panel?
Hi, I'm Laura Hartzenbusch. My film On Beyond Fences is going to be screening tomorrow at 2. Please come and watch it. The film is about Maine State Prison, and its program there, the movement there, is largely based on the Norwegian or Scandinavian approach to incarceration. So, Stacey, I'm really, really interested in how, what the circumstances were for your going to Scandinavia to check out the system there. Tell us about that.
In short, I had no idea about politics or social policies or comparative to anything. I was more interested in just visiting a prison to see what it was like. I was scared to death. Like, I can go into another country and go into that prison, but I was able to get in, and it was a whole different model. I went through, as I was in Cambridge College, I had an opportunity to go to Wheelock, a study abroad, and I was really, really interested in how their Nordic trade model, it wasn't really just the prison, it was just their whole Nordic trade model of how they create a humane society. I visited Maine prisons too, and so I'm not an advocate for prisons. I'm not an advocate for building new prisons. I don't believe we belong in a cage. And so just to answer that in short, I think that what we've developed at New Beginnings Reentry Services, we have a great team. And our vision is deep and big to begin healing. If we're gonna hold people in prisons, then they need to create the models that we're creating out here, right? Again, I'm not an advocate for prisons. We don't belong in cages. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have animals at home that you wouldn't even put in a cage. But since we have them, we need healing spaces. We should be recreating spaces that people get skill sets, people are educated, people are going in for healing, people are starting to develop. If we start understanding the Mattis Law, as you alluded to, Omar, I keep calling you Abdul, Omar.
all good.
Right, this brother here. You alluded to the Mattis Law. If we really understand, I don't know who created this law to say that our brain starts to develop or you know, it starts developing at 21. I'm 63. My brain didn't really come into fruition until 47. And I'm, you know, I'm just being real. When you're coming from trauma, we had shot, stabbed, I told you on the film, we come from a dysfunctional, you couldn't say that word. We come from a dysfunctional community, and then you put us in an unnatural, violent environment. And you want us to come home and do what? There's no doorknobs in prisons. We had a film you saw last night, one of our panelists was scared to open the door in our program. I'm like, that makes sense. We don't have doorknobs in prisons because they lock you in. In Scandinavia, they had keys and they locked themselves in. They treat them humanely. I fainted. I fainted in the prison because I watched them cut with knives. They were in culinary. When I was in Framingham and I'm working in the kitchen in the basement, the knives were chained to the wall. Right? I mean, just real talk. They take them out of the prison after they help them with building trade, electrical, plumbing, everything, and they take them out in the community and they build houses. In Framingham, if you get electrocuted, you can't even go to the HSU. There's a whole different model. They treat them like human beings. And in Maine, you all have a whole high-tech process. They have nonprofit. They have organizations that they're able to create while they're in serving life. Yeah. So it's a difference than what we're doing here in Massachusetts.
All right, do we think we have time for one more question?
Yeah, we got time for a couple more. It's like 5:20. So we're gonna ask our panelists to keep their response real to the point, direct to the point.
Hi, thank you guys for sharing your stories today. My name's Anitza. I am a junior here at Emerson. I've had various family members in and out of the prison system. My brother served from the ages of 17 until he was 30. And I guess my question is, I think people forget that when a loved one is sentenced, your family is sentenced as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, I'm trying not to get emotional. My question just is, how did your time incarcerated affect your relationships with your family? How did it affect when you came out and your way to like socialize and relate to them again after being inside for so long?
What I can tell you is that when I came out of lockup and my mother was visiting me, she was crying. And when she saw me, she wiped the tears away. And I remember saying to her, you know, Ma, you're not sentenced, I was sentenced. So don't come up here again. If I need something, I will call you. Little did I know that that was the last time I would ever see my mother again, because she had died while I was there. Coming out took me a while. I'll never forget it. My wife always, she laughs at this. My niece used to tell me when I used to come home, Uncle Greg, go upstairs to your room. Because every day I would go upstairs like I was going to my cell. You know what I mean? And it took me a while to be able to to really unleash. That's the struggle that men and women, I'm sure, go through when they're coming out, is to be reintegrated back into the family, you know, especially if you didn't have a lot of folks coming up to see you again. When you had to survive and do this on your own, then you come out and you have to really work hard to really not be angry with those folks who never wanted to send you a letter or come visit you. You know, I had a cousin in the same penitentiary I was in, and after my mother died, right, my cousins and everyone would come see him, and not one of them would ever call me out. And I held on to that for a long time because I felt like I had to do this on my own. So it's a process. It's a process.
Is there any other questions? One in the back.
Hi, my name is Iana Milki. I'm a sophomore here at Emerson. And I'm working on a documentary right now about my uncle who was incarcerated for about 7 years for a crime that he didn't commit. And I think one of the biggest mistakes he made, I've come to learn, is that he put his faith in lawyers and in a legal system and judges that really didn't represent him. You know, they sold him out. They didn't have his best interest at heart. So I'm really curious to know about your experience. You know, what kind of access to legal representation did you have? Do you feel like you were fairly represented, either, you know, before your imprisonment or during or after? Yeah.
Well, I think there's many things wrong with the justice system. And definitely you have underpaid attorneys that work for the public counsel, which some call Committee of Public Counsel Services. You know, they have a huge caseload of individuals that they're forced to kind of represent at the same time, and not a lot of patience in the judicial process, right? So there's a lot of added factors especially if you come from no money, that you can't afford to real good, meaningful representation. I can't speak specifically about your uncle's matter, but I do know largely, you know, those circumstances do yield, you know, bad results for everyone, right? And I'm still kind of struggling with this myself because I'm still fighting a case myself. And I've been in for so long, 33 years. And if the parole board itself didn't come to terms with me after 33 years of saying I didn't do it, I wouldn't be here today with you. So, you know, how I think what you're doing by bringing more awareness, making this documentary, bringing more awareness to the situation is necessary. And so I would just urge you to continue on that route, right? And maybe find other solutions to that.
Questions?
I would just like to say real quick, and that is the way the system is hooked up, most of us who come into the system don't know anything about the system. So what happens is when we do get involved, we get a lawyer. It's a word, lawyer. So we think we're going to get representation. We think we're going to get somebody that's going to represent us, but we don't know about the system. There are guys being exonerated right now that have spent 25, 30 years in prison and didn't do it. Now, how a prosecutor can concoct a story and get a man convicted that wasn't even there kind of says something in itself about the system. So we're kind of vulnerable, and if we can make people more aware. I mean, we just had a young man in our program. He's going to court, and I asked him, I said, so how do you talk to your lawyer? You know, his head went down. I said, that's part of the problem, brother. You just got to be able to tell him he's working for you. Tell him what you want, and if he's not going to respond to you, get rid of him. But that's difficult because most of us that are poor, we don't have resources, and we don't know the system, so we get overwhelmed, and that's why we see so much of this injustice.
Thank you for that. And the two questions is two hands up there.
Just wait 1 second.
Thanks. I just wanted to say I have the bill number, Mac. It's Bill H. .2636, the Race Data and Oversight Bill for the state of Massachusetts. So again, that's Bill H. .2636, Race Data and Oversight Bill. And I'll just say I've never met, most lawyers don't know as much as y'all know about the system. So I've learned more about it from you than from other lawyers. But I think that the point of the lawyers work for the system. So how do you create change within a system? The bill, legislature, and how do you create change outside of the system where things don't exist, like Stacey was saying, and like you're all doing. So thank you.
But if Liz Miranda, it's an S bill. Yeah, it's
SB
SB 1725.
1725. It sounds like that's the, right, usually the SB is before they assign the bill number. That's the preliminary number. That's the docket number before they do the bill.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Someone very close to me was arrested this weekend. What was interesting was the judges was giving out $75,000 bonds to everyone, and luckily this person got $5,000 because they had a really great lawyer. And I've just been wrestling with this term, justice, all week, and especially because I do this work, but then it really hit me really close to home this week. So I just wanted to ask, how you define justice based on your experiences, and this is for anyone or one person, whoever wants to answer it. But after all these experiences that you're kind of sharing, what does that term mean to you, or how do you think of it?
Real quick, I'm gonna give it to you. We always believed justice was just us.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There is no justice. I don't feel like I was, in that process to be put in a cage. I could have been sent to a drug treatment problem. I had a drug treatment problem. But when you said that, and prior to that, I want to really talk about how do we reverse that? I belong to an amazing organization called Families for Justice is Healing, and we do participatory defense. We get to participate in someone's defense because lawyers are overloaded, overworked, and they can't possibly see what's going on. You can't have somebody come in a court cell and talk to me for 2 minutes and now you could represent me. And so we do the representation. Some of us could even write closing arguments in a case. And in particular, we brought home Raymond Gaines after 47 years. We did that in our backyard in 4 years, wrongfully convicted. So there's no justice.
Yeah, I would just like to say this. The reform that began in the 70s, the reform acts that began in the 70s was because of an extreme situation. And usually, unfortunately, extreme situations motivate people. But right now, we have people in this room you can be a part of bills such as what Mac brought up. Activism is probably the greatest motivator for politicians to do something, because politicians are concerned about their job. And so if we are motivated to be out and be activists for the justice that we think the system should have, then that's the only thing that's going to make the difference, because as far as they're concerned, the justice system is a business. And it's in the business of staying in business, but it's also in the business of increasing their business. So the profit margin for them is greater. So it's going to take concerned citizens to get on board and make the issue that something's got to change. Because if we don't, it remains the same or gets worse. There were guys now getting out of prison. You see, my 48 years, this guy's getting out with 52, 54, 55 years. What does a 75-year-old man come out and do once he's been in prison that long? One of my friends that just got out, he's in the house with his sister who's 79. He's 75. His whole life we grew up in prison together. His whole life is just, he's an old man now. And what's his life about? And that's, someone said the parole, I think it was Greg said earlier, and I have to say something about Greg. This man here, I don't even have words for him, man. He just came in the system and blew it up and made things happen because God made him that way. And he's a very rare individual that came through this system. And we love him for what he's done over the years. And I think we need to definitely say something. This guy, and I'm sorry I'm tangent off a little bit, but this guy's hot, man. I don't know even what to say. Because like you said, he would sacrifice his own to get them to do something to make things better for others. So I want to let some more questions to get out here, so I don't want to keep going, please.
Well, with that being said, we have time for one more question, not to eliminate anybody else.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank y'all for y'all time and for telling y'all stories and you know, being the subject of Mac's film. And Mac, from being there in class with you and hearing that you wanted to make films and then actually seeing the fruition of it, I'd like to congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
And the rest of the panelists for you know, being powerful, strong, and focused enough to change their lives and change other people's lives in the process. I have a question for you, Mac. They said it's your second film. Do you have any plans on stepping away from just the documentary lane and possibly doing a feature film? And would you take the same subject matter and infuse that into that?
What do you mean, like fiction?
No, not fiction, but like
Feature.
you know, you have.
So for me, the idea, I should say, thanks to Shane, Stephen Shane, I borrowed his equipment for a good while, took it hostage for about a year and a half, and filmed over 48 interviews of folks between former, people who were former commissioners of the Department of Corrections to other staff, religious folks who were involved in the Department of Corrections that worked there, and generationally, just all folks that, because the idea for me was I wanted to capture this history, and I wanted to, create a 3-part documentary that would be one day filmed. And so, I did the first one for REICI to kind of talk about the racial element for legislators who are unaware of what happens. But this one was more so that I can enter it into film festivals and create more awareness and hopefully raise money so that we can do a 3-part documentary on this historical moment, because most people don't even know about John Boone, his contributions. Just like people don't understand about where the term inmate, where the Department of Corrections came from. They don't understand that. The whole idea, it was really for the Department of Correction to become a facility. That's why they don't call it prison, they call it facilities. They want it to be a treatment facility that you entered into. Boone's idea was so far in advance that at the time when that legislation was passed, they said it was the best reform legislation that outdid even California. And California got conjugal visits. But now, what we don't talk about, and I wanted to kind of say this for my sister Stacey, the term inmate actual means resident. That's what it means. When you're a resident to a treatment facility, you become an inmate to that. So they were supposed to change this language a long time ago. By the time I entered into the system, we were still using words like convict and prisoners and what have you, because they wanted to eradicate everything that Boone did. So by the time they actually started using the term, it took on a negative connotation because of the way the officers were using it. They was using it as if you was like a flunky, if you was like a cell, so nobody wanted to be an inmate at this point. You know what I'm saying? But this is the reason why we have to know the history of something, is so that we can understand what the actual reforms, how they worked, what they did, and then how did we get so far removed? Because what they're doing in Maine right now with education, we could do legitimately here in Massachusetts, and it's already passing the legislation. It's already on the books for it to be done. You know what I'm saying? It's just no one is enforcing it. We don't have the ability to enforce it unless you get the governor and everyone else who are aware, society is aware that it is on the books, and we want it as citizens of Massachusetts to be done that way.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let me just ask you, brother, were you just auditioning for a part in the movie?
Yeah, I may have.
Sounded like it, man.
I may have.
With that being said, and I appreciate the question, with that being said, the panel is available after we leave the forum to answer
we have this
questions on the side, because I see a few people had hands up, so if you want to approach the panel and inquire above them,